Breakfast and to help kick off what I know will be an engaging discussion on the status of the press. As leaders, we recognize the importance of reliable and accurate information and the challenges of misinformation in today's digital world. Enhancing communications between the City of Framingham and its residents, businesses, and community partners has been a priority of my administration since day one. In the spring of 2023, I made an important hire, bringing on Susan Scully-Petroni, an award-winning journalist with 4 decades of experience, as our new public information officer. Under her leadership, the city's Facebook page has grown from just under 7,500 followers to nearly 13,000, an increase of about 80%. She's also expanded our social media presence to include Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok, using video to reach new audiences and younger residents. In October of 2023, Susan launched the city's weekly newsletter, which just this fall celebrated its 100th edition. Through her work, our residents are more informed not only about what's happening in City Hall, but also what is happening in our entire community. But communication is not just about press releases or follower counts. It's about civic engagement in the digital age. We've seen residents attend public meetings after reading about them online, volunteer for boards and committees that they've discovered through a post, or share valuable feedback that helps us make better informed decisions. And there's also the human side of communication. Behind every post, newsletter, and update, there's a real effort in my administration to connect with people, not just report information. We want residents to feel seen, heard, and part of the story of Framingham. But finally, as we reflect on today's theme, I want to highlight the importance of leadership in media literacy. In an era where headlines move faster than facts, each of us has a responsibility to verify sources and think critically about the information we consume and share. During my recent re-election campaign, I saw firsthand how misinformation can spread quickly and on social media. Unfortunately, some residents rely solely on social platforms for their news, where facts and opinions can easily blur. That's why it's vital to support credible, independent journalism and ensure that residents have access to accurate, balanced reporting, not just through city communication channels, but through trusted media sources. An informed community is a stronger community. In my administration, we'll continue to work collectively with the press to promote transparency, accountability, and truth in public discourse. So I want to thank leadership MetroWest for fostering these important conversations, and I expect you to have a wonderful and productive conversation today and into the future. Thank you very much.
The mayor stole my speech. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Leadership MetroWest's 2025 Fall Breakfast. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and to welcome 26 new leaders from the class of 2026 here. We gather united by a shared mission to cultivate trusted leaders who will actively engage our communities and foster meaningful connections. This morning's conversation promises to be engaging and timely, focused on local news, leadership, and community trust. Thank you to the mayor and his team, Sandy and Brendan and everyone that makes this event happen today, for hosting us at Nevins Hall. This space has been a historic hub for civic connection, and we're grateful to gather here today. For those that haven't had the pleasure of meeting me, I'm Jamie Chapman. I am the chair of the board for Leadership MetroWest. I am a Framingham resident, I am an entrepreneur, and I am the graduate of the Best Class Ever 2022. My team is here. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the current board and supporting committee members who make our work possible. If you are a current board or committee member, please stand to be recognized. None of these events would be possible without the dedication of our board of directors and volunteers who support us throughout the year. And of course, as you know, none of this work would be possible without your financial support. As we enter the season of giving and reflect on the organizations that have shaped us, we know that Leadership MetroWest's experience continues to live in your hearts and your minds. As we approach 40 years of impact and connection across the MetroWest region, we invite you to give back to the organization that continues to invest in the leaders of today and tomorrow. You'll find QR codes available throughout the room, so you can visit our website, leadershipmetrowest.org, to give a one-time donation or a recurring donation. This morning, our main focus is on the crucial skill of discernment, how leaders actively evaluate information to build community trust. With news traveling faster than context, the leadership demands more than just staying informed. We're called to practice discernment. Each headline, news, and social media post, or even a passing comment, is filtered through the countless lenses of perspectives of others, the platforms that amplify them, and our own personal histories. Not all information is created equal. And yet, our brains are wired to fill the gaps, to connect the dots, to make meanings, and build stories that help us feel safe and certain. That instinct served us well when we were on survival, depending on quick decisions. But today, it often tempts us to mistake familiarity for truth. As leaders, our work is to pause long enough to ask the deeper questions. Where is this information coming from? What story might I be telling myself about what this means? And how might someone else's lived experience reshape the understanding of it? At our core, we are meaning-making beings. We don't just consume stories, we interpret them and we carry them forward. Every experience we've had, every success, every challenge, every relationship becomes part of the lens through which we see the world. That's why conversations like ours today matter so much. They invite us to slow down the scroll, to widen our view, and to listen beyond our bias. They give us a space to practice the kind of curiosity that strengthens our communities and the kind of humility that deepens our leadership. Leadership starts here, with the awareness of self, others, and narrative shaping the communities that we serve. Thank you for being here today. Your commitment to deliberate discernment, careful discernment, truly shapes our leadership and builds community trust. Before we begin our program today, please save the date for our next gathering, Thursday, March 19th, for our spring breakfast, which will be hosted with deep gratitude for Dr. Loretta Holloway and Framingham State University. At that event, we'll be inviting you, our alumni community, to shape the future by nominating candidates for our next Leadership MetroWest class of 2027. This will also mark our next milestone in our journey to cultivate 40 years of trusted leadership. Please consider who you know might be a strong addition and be prepared to submit your nomination. Now, it's my honor to introduce our new leader, whose leadership has inspired me, our board and our committees, and our entire alumni network. Straight from the class of 2015, who claims to have coined the best class ever. Trish, thank you for your guidance, your vision, and dedication to Leadership MetroWest. We are so grateful that you are here, and we are so excited for our future. Please join me in welcoming Trish to the podium.
I can't tell you how vindicated I feel having Helen just say, you didn't hear up front, but best class ever, 2015 class project. Thank you. focus, Trish. You are not here to hear me, so I'm going to keep my remarks very brief. But I did want to share the origin story of this panel. Unfortunately, Ross Kerber, who one of our panelists, is sick today. He did ask if he could come with his germs, and I said no. But he is responsible for the creation of the idea. Ross is a journalist. He's also a cyclist, and he rides with my husband. They met in college on the Penn cycling team and are still riding together, which I think is amazing. Once or twice a year, they sign up for some esoteric bike race ride thing that always starts with Ross skiving out of whatever story he's writing for the day to come write it at my kitchen table before heading off hither, dither, and yon. And this happened a few months ago, and I had the privilege of watching a Reuters journalist put together a national story from my kitchen table. It was distracting. I didn't get a lot done that day. But it did remind me of the craft that it takes to write a good piece of journalism, the work that it takes to check sources, and the fact that your story at 8:30 in the morning might be different by 2 p.m. if you were in the news. That's what brought this whole panel idea together. I'm grateful for our panelists who are joining us today. I'm grateful to the class of 2026 for being here for this inaugural breakfast. Yes, that's right, Yvette. Yvette, you lead everyone in the chair. You are a strong, bright class and an important part of our future. Speaking of our future, this is the first really encore alumni gathering that I am running. I invite each and every one of you who may have an idea for something that you would like to explore as a topic, a concept, or a project to be in communication, because we are a community of leaders, and together we will make this organization strong. So please think about joining the Encore Committee or sending me an email with some ideas. All right, without further ado, Mary Kate, where are you? It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Ms. Mary Kate Duffy. Mary Kate Feeney, sorry. Mary Kate Duffy, I went to high school with, sorry.
I know those Irish names are really tough. It's okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Kate Feeney from the class of 23, which is the... It is so great to see everybody this morning for a great and informative topic that I think is on everybody's mind. I'd like to ask the panel to come up, and I'm going to introduce them. And our first panelist is Jerry Berger. He is the lecturer and director of Statehouse reporting program at Boston University. And we have Jason Daniels, also from the best class ever of 23. He is the executive director of Access Framingham. And June Kintoshita, he's the co-founder and executive editor of the Waltham Times. And then Kristen Pope from the class of 24, which I guess is an okay class, who's the entrepreneur, journalist, and multimedia strategist. This is quite the panel, folks. So we're all news nerds in here, I'm assuming. And we have a lot of questions about what's going on and how we navigate this world. When I was a kid, I thought newspapers were the best thing ever, probably because I watched the Waltons and I loved John Boy Walton, who started the Blue Ridge Chronicle, for those who are really nerds in 1970s TV. And that led me down my little journalism, government, communications path. But a lot has changed since I was writing the Pheasant Hill Chronicle when I was 10. So let's dive in and talk about the current state of affairs. And this is a question for all of you. What does good journalism look like today? And kind of walk us through your job, where you get your stories, and what is your role with reporting and journalism? Jerry?
As someone who teaches, I get my story ideas from a number of sources. Let me explain a little bit how the BU Statehouse program works. It's both a 3-hour classroom session Monday morning at 8 a.m., so you have some committed students. But in addition to that, my students go out and report on issues in the Statehouse from a local perspective. writing to local newspapers. As a matter of fact, MetroWest Daily News is one of them. There's an organization called the Statehouse News Service, which offers up advances of what's taking place in that coming week. And I talked to my class about these things and make suggestions of how they could localize them. So if there's a story about education, they use the event in the Statehouse, whether it's a hearing, a press conference, whatever, but then they try to advance that story. They talk to local people. They try and talk to, they talk to local officials, both representatives and senators in the Statehouse, important local electeds, but also real people. And what I try and encourage my students to do is talk to real people about how events in government affect the lives of real people. And that's sort of it in a nutshell.
I wanted to follow up on one thing, because you were talking about the Statehouse News Bureau, and we were chatting a little bit before then about one of the things that has changed. Can you talk about, just briefly, about the difference between the Statehouse News Bureau today and what it was like, say, 20 years ago?
20 years ago, the Statehouse News Service has been around for about 100 years. It's kind of invaluable. And then it was a supplement to a rather large local press corps that was working in the Statehouse Press Gallery. That room is pretty much vacant these days. And I used to work for a different wire service, which now most people would not remember whatsoever, United Press International. There was also the Associated Press. It's still around. We each had 4 people covering the Statehouse. That was during the 80s. Today, the best of my knowledge, the AP does not have a full-time reporter in the Statehouse. So the Statehouse News Service functions basically as a wire service for not only lobbyists and organizations, but now it is a source of news for publications, much the way the AP and UPI used to be.
I think that's a very important distinction. I used to work in the Statehouse, and that room used to be filled. If you go back today, there's barely anybody in there. Jason, how does this work from an access public television perspective about good journalism?
Okay, yeah, thanks. So as the executive director of Access Framingham, we have an initiative called The Frame, which is Framingham News in Focus. We started it about 2 years ago, September of 23, with 2 staff people. As an access station, a lot of people come from different backgrounds. So for these roles, we specifically hired students, graduates, or people that are in the industry. So I think for us, the good journalism starts with people that understand journalism. We do not, at this time, have volunteers working for us. We have staff people. And what we do with that 2.5 staff now is harvest information from around the city, from around the blogs, from around newsletters, other publications, and then discuss it as a team and try to figure out what are the stories that we think are of relevance to the community. And we try to do that with a balance of things that are happening here at Nevins Hall and sort of civic information, as well as stories around the community, because I think, people need to take their medicine, obviously, and understand the vital things that are happening in the community, but it's also important to share stories of connection with the people and individuals that make a community like Framingham, unique and great.
Awesome. If you haven't seen The Frame, I'm just going to promote it. It's a great, great news program here in Framingham. We're very lucky. June.
Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. So I would say our process is very similar to what was just described. We're brand new, by the way. We published our first story last year of October, and we were started by a fairly good place. And the Waltham Times is a nonprofit, independent news organization founded by a group of concerned citizens in Waltham about 1.5 years ago. the city essentially lost its daily paper about a decade ago, kind of faded out, and then essentially there's no newsreel functioning in Waltham at the time. So we said, we need good independent journalism to report on what's happening in the city. And so a group of people got together. Some of them are professional journalists. I had journalism background and also a nonprofit startup and management background. So starting a nonprofit newspaper is what I've been waiting for all my life. So we have a big group of volunteers that support a lot of the different aspects and operations, but we also hire freelance journalists right now. We're working towards getting to where we can make, we're actually actively recruiting a part-time assistant editor. So, we got ourselves on all these mailing lists to get a lot of press releases. There's a very active, robust, Facebook, Reddit pages. So we pick up tips, and we also, as you say, talking to people is really important. I spend a lot of time just going out and meeting people, see what's going on in different organizations, what's happening in daily life in the city. And then we have news conferences with our core editorial team. They figure out how we're going to cover them, what's important. We are very hyper-focused on Waltham, so it has to have some relevance to Waltham. If it's a national or state level news, we always look at how does that impact people in Waltham, and we try to find people who are directly impacted. So the other day, again, someone who was on SNAP supporting a disabled child, living in Waltham, talking about what SNAP was meant to them and thoughts of it would mean to them. We are there. Our mission is twofold. One is accountability. We have somebody in every city government meeting that we can find out about. Waltham is always very transparent about when they're having meetings. And to your point, I don't believe the city has a public information officer. That speaks to what happens when you don't have news. Organizations get lazy. They don't feel like they need to have an official position that is there to inform the public about what's happening. So we do that, but we also feel that newspapers have the informational glue that holds a community together. How do you find out what's even happening? You drive by the Common, there's some big festival, you never heard about it, you don't know what it is, or there's a big building suddenly going up, or suddenly your street is being dug up, and it's really good to have people that have a good way to find that out. There are many nonprofits that are doing incredible work right now. How do people learn about those? So we have arts and culture. All of those things are essential for people to feel invested in the place they live, to feel connected to it. So we see that as an essential role as well. And there's no end of story until you start looking.
Yeah, just pin that thought. That's the next question about community. And we'll get right back. It's very good points about, I like how June and Jerry just brought together about local news and how it's important about national news and how making it very local, and so that it's more of that we can connect with that. Kristen, can you talk about what happens, about good journalism?
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. I just have to give great gratitude for being here and being in this incredible panel and seeing all of you here. It's just a pleasure to be here this morning. And this is really, really, really close to my heart, like all of us. So I want to tap into what June said. That's a huge pain point in municipalities. And so kudos to you all for solving that. It's something that we are struggling with in Natick. One of the things that wasn't said about me is that I sit on the select board in Natick. And so it's one of those things we are really trying to solve for. In so many municipalities, local news is gone, especially hyper-local news, because of much, for the most part, and this ability to cover it. So kudos to you guys, and I will definitely be following up with you on that, June. So the way that I approach covering news is to look for the stories that are not being told. When you're reporting on stories that exist, you're typically doing public relations. You're doing them a service for public relations. But journalism at its core is going to find stories that are not being told. A story that I'm really interested in that I haven't found anyone talking about is what's happening to our court system right now. Our court systems are jammed up with, federal lawsuits, local lawsuits, state lawsuits. Nobody is talking about what's happening to our court system, to attorneys, to the bench. No one's talking about that. But to me, that's good journalism. What is happening to our court system right now? How is it being transformed completely because there is a lawsuit happening every 5 minutes because of something that's, going on? We could pick something, you know what I mean? So to me, that is good journalism. And then you go in source, like what are our best sources? Jerry, you talked about the Associated Press. To me, the Associated Press is still the bar. So you still have to know what is the bar. We as consumers of news now have to become more circumspect about how we go get our news, where we're finding it from, and getting sources. I mean, what you're teaching your students. I was a journalism student at Hampton University over 20 years ago, and that was how we learned how to tell our stories. You, one, have to go find something that's not being told, and two, you have to go fact check it like 5 times. And so we have to know what are those good sources, the Reuters, the Associated Press. These are places that are the standard. PBS, NPR, these are my favorite places, but these, and for citizen journalism, right, I don't want to get too far into this, Mary Kay, you can stop me. So supporting these places by the citizenry is critically important, because this is how you know that you're getting integrity. Okay, I'll stop.
No, we're gonna just keep going on this thread. What is happening? I read a couple of months ago, someone saying that if you're a local politician, now is the time to get away with corruption because there's nobody watching you. The irony of the counselor-elect just saying that is really fabulous. So talk about how this is affecting communities and what can we as leaders do to help our local news to support these nonprofit initiatives, our Access TV. What really is happening to a community when there isn't the news, and how can we support it? Kristen, I'll let you start.
Thank you. One of the things that I think we talked about in the pre-context of this question was trust in organizations. But what I have found is the real breakdown of the lack of hyper-local news is trust in each other. That is what I'm finding as a breakdown. When you stop hearing human stories about your neighbor, then somehow they become this phantom. You don't know what's going on. There's a disconnect when you don't know what's happening in your own neighborhood. People begin, you're gonna get your news somewhere. And so we're getting it from the national level, maybe the state level, but you don't know what's going on in your own community. So it's deeper than not trusting the institution, like your select board, your mayor, your city council, your finance committee. It becomes, I don't trust my neighbor. We no longer have the same mission in this community to take care of one another, to live with one another, to love one another, to raise each other's children. Somehow we now have different DNA. And that to me has been one of the greatest tragedies of the loss of news, because you see it in the way people talk to each other online. If any of you are in your town Facebook group and you see an issue go up and how people attack not the issue but one another, that's because there's a disconnect in community. And the disconnect in community comes from the lack of just knowing one another. Now, we don't expect our community to be in rooms like this where you're talking to people, seeing people. When I say see people, I'm referring to this, there's a phrase in South Africa that says it's called sawubona. And when you say it to one another, it means I see you. People aren't always gonna be in rooms like this. But if they also are not in rooms like this, they're not serving their community, and they're not getting human stories from their local news, it is the space of disconnection.
Yeah. June, your thoughts?
I agree with that. It's a tragedy affecting all of our society right now. And I think the resurrection of local news is the way to start to rebuild that trust. And we have a lot of work to do, because when we announced we were starting the Waltham Times, there was a whole cohort of people like, this is great, I love it. And they almost felt like we would take on an advocatory voice to amplify whatever they were. And we would say, just be very clear, we're journalists, we're not here to advocate, we're here to report and fact check and make sure it's reliable and so on. But there was another group of people who are like, so is it going to be fair? Is it going to be, there was already a deep inherent distrust of anything that calls itself news or journalism. So, and all we can do is, we reach out to those people and say, well, we want to hear your stories too. If they don't return our email, they don't return our phone calls. But the other day I went to an event and I sat down with someone who had not returned our phone calls. And by the end of that, it was a little tea party at local museum, a social event where we were sharing stories about, everyone brought a teacup and told a story about what that teacup meant to them. Very simple social interaction. By the end of that tea party, he was saying, what can I do to help you? So we have to start rebuilding the relationships, and editors, I'm sure the publisher, de facto publisher board, we see ourselves as ambassadors to try to rebuild those parts of art that has fallen apart. We also have rules around accountability and community standards, so we don't allow certain types of posts, not based on political views, but if somebody goes on a profane screed, that doesn't get published. But I might write back and say, well, you made some points, but you need to do it in a way that meets our community standards, and you can't libel people, you can't. Right. So I think we feel we play that important role of that, so say, repairing some connections that have been broken down in the
Yeah, trust is such a big thing. Jerry, when you teach your students and through your time as a reporter, how do you establish that trust with polarized and skeptical audiences? And the second part for you to think about, do journalists contribute to that polarization?
Good journalists do not contribute to polarization, but there's a complete misunderstanding these days, I think, of what is journalism. And a lot of outlets, websites, social media sites, like to call themselves civic journalists, citizen journalists, but they're not. A good journalist, what I tell my students is, show your work. That's one of the simplest and best ways to engender trust. And that's the flip side of such an online community. Now, through the wonders of hyperlinking, which did exist when I was a regular reporter, you can be very clear of where you're getting your information from. Check, double check, triple check. You don't use the anonymous sources cause a lot of confusion. Just because you don't know who is saying something doesn't mean they don't exist. They may have a reason, and there's for wanting to protect their identity. If they want to throw insults, my rule is, they don't get anonymity. But if somebody, say, a SNAP recipient who doesn't want to feel embarrassed by needing the assistance, if they want to go by a first name or a middle name, that's fine. But you need to show your sources. You need to show that there are real people that are behind everything.
The humanity of it all. Jason, what are your thoughts about trust, especially when, public access is a little different than everybody else? So do you have any issues with skeptical audiences and in establishing trust in that way?
Sure.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that.
If people are generally suspicious of news. Recently, I read a report that certain words, even the word journalist, democracy, are like politically charged words that in order to gain trust of a certain group, you might not want to use those words, even though I think at the core, everybody wants to support local news. I think people understand how important local news is. So for us, being out there, if people have an email or a phone, they talk to a person, we can work with them. We're slowly building the trust. You know, we have not been in Framingham for 4 years, so people don't necessarily come to us with the background information on stories at this time, but we do make ourselves available for that, and we show up, and I think we're trying to build trust by showing.
Let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about kind of the elephant in the room, the economics of it all. And I think, I was talking to Kristen about this earlier. I have some family members who love to watch news all the time, 24/7. And I once said, you know they're doing this so that you keep watching it, so that they get the eyeballs, so that they get the ad revenue, right? And the response from this family member was like, well, just because you don't like what they're saying. So let's unpack the business side of this. How much does does economics drive the news that we receive? I'm going to start with June.
How much does it affect you? Well, I'm kind of selective about
Yeah,
things I'm taking in. So, nationally, I think, those robust, legacy drawing.
let me pivot this a little bit for you about nonprofit, the business model of the nonprofits. Do you think this is sustainable?
We'll find out. Yeah, no. I think it can be. We say, we're using kind of the NPR model, and that could take that other way. But NPR I certainly hope it will survive. It might have to scale back a bit or something, but they've developed a robust community of donors in the public, and what we're trying to do is the same. And the way I see it, I think volunteers are always going to be a very important part of something happening at local level. So when you have about 50 or 60 volunteers, and they come with all kinds of skills, from graphic design to business, marketing, accounting, and so on. And they're all happy to participate. They're really thrilled to be involved and have something they can do with their skills that contributes in this way to the community. But we will absolutely need to raise enough money to pay some full-time staff, editors, studying editors, and they'd like to have some reporters. Right now we use a combination of incredibly, really talented BU journalism students, and there's an incredible, wonderful program there where there's this experienced editor who edits their works and basically delivers publication writing, copy to a variety of local newspapers, and that helps us tremendously. But we want to also have an advertising revenue base, and we'd like to, I guess our hypothesis is that local businesses are going to come back to local journalism because they're going to get the eyeballs that they want, and not just spread it out over some, and that we would like to eventually have a print publication. I don't think we could ever go to a daily again, but maybe a bi-weekly or monthly, something that sits, and people have asked us for this, like, I want something that we read over my breakfast coffee. If we can produce something that has some enduring content and advertising local businesses, I think those businesses will really value having that kind of, exposure. So when you ask, like, how to support you, if you are a business, buy ads or become a sponsor. Just be part of the civic community we're supporting.
Again, it's going back to community, and that businesses are very much part of our community. Jerry, what's your take on the economics of the news today?
The industry writ large is in trouble. A large part of it is because of the way people don't trust it, but the way to rebuild the trust is local. I started, I'm not sure which direction anymore. I started at the Marlboro Enterprise and knew what was going on in that community, and I built my career from that. And that's the way that journalism restores its business model to this, as June was saying, by building the trust in the community. My program, Statehouse program, is part of this now, this broader program that BU is doing. The difference is my students cover the Statehouse for local publications, and the newsroom program is covering meetings and all sorts of other things. But it's building it at the ground up, getting the support locally to restore local journalism, to restore trust in news.
Thank you. Kristen, do you have any thoughts about the economics? I know you do.
I've never said this phrase like in earnest, but when it comes to journalism, follow the money is so true. It's so true. Economics plays a large role in what we're hearing and what we're saying. The system that controls the journalistic property is also who owns the narrative. And I'm always looking to who owns this narrative, who's leading this narrative. I was really grateful that you expounded, June, on what it costs and what it takes. I had this opportunity to listen to a talk with the former CEO, president of the Ford Foundation, Darren Walker. And one of the things he talked about was the reason why philanthropy is necessary is because of inequality. And so when you see companies like Paramount and Skydance or whatever it's called, coming together to build these conglomerates, and then you see the type of ad revenue that's coming, you should also question, well, what are we getting from them? Who is building this narrative and why? And then separately, when you have local ad revenue, you know that's coming from the community. The community is funding that narrative. They're funding this property. And that's huge. So economics plays a huge role in what we are getting, what we're listening to, what we are ultimately believing, what we ultimately believe as truth. And I'm telling you, I mean, if you do watch the news, I'm divested a bit from the news, but if you do watch the news and you see some of these ads, aren't you just like jarred? Like, I can't believe that based on what I'm watching, that came on the screen. Because now there's no discretion. All money isn't good money. But if you follow the money, you see the narrative that is being shaped for you to believe.
With all of these economic pressures, political pressure facing the media industry right now, do you think Watergate could happen again? Apparently I'm in a 1970s theme today, but like, are reporters still able to hold powerful people accountable? I'll start with Kristen and I'll work my way down.
Good question. Okay, shout out to Rachel Scott on ABC. Rachel Scott is doing the darn thing. She has been a person that I've seen several times over the last year hold 47 accountable for the things he said, but it is getting harder and harder. And that is when you see the citizenry rise up. That's when you begin to see citizen journalism rise up, when you're now being required to sign a document in order to be in the press pool, or you'd have to say it this way in order to be on Air Force One. This is when you begin to see activist journalists rise up, because that is not journalism. People are being hamstrung. And so I think we will see accountability, but in a different way.
Okay. June?
I think we can still there are amazing, brave, persistent investigative reporters out there. So these stories, I think, can come out, and they're not captive to like just a few sources right now. So there are alternative journalism sources, not just, advocacy sources. But when we talk about accountability, journalists ultimately can't hold people accountable. We can only report, and it's up to the institutions to hold their people accountable. And if you have, so with Watergate, what happened is that Republicans, when they're confronted with the reporting in the Washington Post, they held their president accountable. That's the gap that we're having today.
Jason.
I do believe that good reporting is happening, great reporting is happening. Who's listening? And do people feel empowered through what they're hearing to take act? It sort of feels like in some ways that maybe it's social media, but all the noise has grinded us all down, and we just don't have the mental energy to find the information that's important to us. Information is a utility. I think it should be considered a utility. And I think in that way, the expectation that good news and information is free is false. And if there's one assumption that maybe you should take from this is that local news should not be free. It really never was free. And the information you get from social media, just because you don't pay for it, is not free. So I just want to sort of shout out organizations like Binge, the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. I went to the New England Newsroom meetup a couple weeks ago, and there are some great local organizations that are taking stabs at these local issues. I think the national and global issues are extremely challenging, complex to try to disentangle ourselves from. But I think on the local level, we certainly are capable of doing that, and it's a question of figuring out how to turn down the noise or give people an off-ramp, if you will, to try to get access to that information.
I'm going to be the skunk in the garden party.
Yes.
I would argue we are experiencing Watergate 100-fold. The difference is back then there was more limited, you had the more traditional, what we now call the mainstream or lamestream or legacy media, and you do have different alternative voices. And I just saw something in a newsletter that I get that as of noon yesterday, after the news of the Epstein emails came out, as of noon, CNN, MSNBC each ran something like 15 minutes of reporting on it. Fox ran 6 seconds. And as long as you have an alternative media and I'm working on a proposal for a book that my rough title is Slow Motion Coup, How the Legacy Media Has Lost the War on Truth. A lot of that is economics. The traditional media has fallen by the wayside because it couldn't support itself. But there's also been this concerted effort to create an alternative source of news, whether it's a Fox, whether it's X, whether it's other sources online, which aren't really news. And when you're competing and following this noise, the truth tends to get lost.
Let's talk a little bit about the noise. And it's probably the number one question that I have heard. I think it's the question burning in everyone's mind right now. How do we stay informed as individuals without being overwhelmed? So how are we protecting our mental health without burning out and shutting off? Jerry?
That's another part of the problem. A lot of people are just turning off and shutting out. They're tired of what's the constant battles that have been taking place, not simply in the Trump era. It goes farther back. And people do need to preserve their sanity, and these are insane times. I'm not sure I can answer the question. I'm a news junkie. I've never shut it off, but I don't know what that middle ground is. I'm sorry.
I suppose you have to find the news sources that you trust and support them. Ultimately there is so much noise, and it is paralyzing. I'm not saying anything necessarily new with that, but I think you just have to understand that that's the way it is. I think you're insane if you're going to try to convince yourself that it's going to change. The system has evolved in the way that it's evolved. This is kind of where we're at as a culture. I think we brought up media literacy, or it was brought up earlier today. I'll go back to that, the public utility argument for local information. Water is a public utility too, but you wouldn't want it to come to your house without being filtered.
All right. Yeah, you're going to steal that.
Right. Who does the filtering? In our case, as a nonprofit organization, we have a local advisory board. It's open we're accepting new members. But it's built around the community. And so that's how at least we're trying to divert some of the resources here. But, when you go to a buffet, how do you prevent yourself from overeating?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. It's a lot to put on the person to prevent themselves from going crazy, but ultimately that is part of it too.
Well, I regularly read, a few trusted major media sources. I had to leave Twitter when they started messing with the algorithm and I was getting things that I didn't really want to see, and moved over to Threads because I found, the early days of Twitter, it was extraordinary. You could hear voices from the ground about what was happening. It wasn't journalism, but it gave you it added context and things that were happening. And once I found that it wasn't providing that value anymore, I left it and I went to Threads. And what I do, I kind of treat it as a personalized wire service. So if you are on social media, I curate who I'm going to hear from, trusted sources, maybe that complement. You can look at their background and you can look through search. And I tell people, there's a lot of stuff out there. You just have to do your homework. You have to make sure that the source identifies itself. If that's some shadowy organization, it's like who's on the board, who are the editors, who's funding it. All that stuff has to be transparent. And do they hold themselves accountable for the quality of the information they're providing? If you see an organization where someone says something's demonstrably, provably incorrect and false, and they don't publish, a big retraction, and they keep that journalist or person on, then to me that's not a real news organization. They're not holding their journalists accountable. So yeah, that's what I do. But then I'm a news junkie too, and I'm in the business. I can't afford not to follow the news. But I try to limit it by curating what I hear, and I make sure there's some interesting organizations out there that bring, again, curated, but from kind of diverse political viewpoints, because it's also really important to understand what other types of ways are people seeing and perceiving and interpreting news that might be different to their own. Kristen?
I agree that there's a lot of noise, it's very noisy. I oversee the social media department in the Division of Continuing Education at Harvard University. Very noisy. And I think this is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity to, as June, I love the word curate, and also own your space. This is an opportunity, and every day is an opportunity to take power back. We don't have to be just thrown into the blender of chaos. Even though that's the world we live in, everybody has their own universe. And so in your own universe, you get to determine what comes in and what goes out. And so you get to determine, I'm going to listen to these folks or listen to these, these particular sources. And I'm going to pivot a little bit from what Jerry said, because I like some of these alternative sources. As long as you can verify, I think some of this is good, because if the legacy media is not able to keep up with the times, and what we mean on the times is that things are moving so fast that sometimes the place where you're going to find the story is on social, because they were able to get to it first. They were able to amplify it first. There have been so many stories over the last couple of months that I have been shocked that they have not got national news coverage. I'm like, why is this story not on the national news? And you're almost forced to go to Democracy Now! Or some other place to get the details on what's going on. So I think we have to own our spaces, curate our spaces, yes, limit where we're going, and determine that it's you who gets to make those decisions. You don't have to just be lashed around, being whiplashed all day long by the fake breaking news headlines.
So just to dig into that a little further, curation is great. Huge fan of curation. But where does the line come where we're curating and we're siloing, right? And so now we're just stuck wherever our political persuasion is. Now we're only reading or listening to that news. So what's the difference between curation and living in a silo? And how do we, this is probably the biggest issue of just being, single-minded.
I think that goes back to what we have all advocated for, which is local news. Because like this Waltham Times, what you're doing is that means those folks are tapped into their community. Now, with that being said, I live in, and it depends what kind of community you live in. If you live in a community that, like mine, is 2% Black, I probably need to go outside of my community's local for Black issues. I need an expanse. And same thing, I think this curation starts local, but it continues to ripple out. But it requires that all of us become smarter consumers, actually. And some of this is going back to the basics, which is why I love what Jerry's talking about, because whenever we get into a tipping point, and I think we're probably past the tipping point now, it's best to go back to the basics of a thing, the foundation of a thing, because that is where we can determine, are we still what we said we were? Are we still human beings, or have we become rabbits? No, are we still fundamentally what we're supposed to be doing? That's why we have missions and visions, because they always bring you back to the purpose of a thing. So I purposely want to engage with, not just one type of human, all types of humans. And in order to do that, that means that I have to actively seek out the type of information that's going to put me in close proximity with human beings.
I love it. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I guess I'd say at the local level too, we need to make some elbow room for some opinions and perspectives that are uncomfortable to us. I know that there are some in Framingham, but I think at some point you also have to just understand that if you're going to have a robust community, you have to at least make space for people's perspectives you don't necessarily support. That doesn't mean that you can't have rules of the road with civility. And maybe that's part of the challenge of, sort of maturing a, community-based nonprofit is navigating some of those waters. But at least at the local level, that's what I'm seeing. Getting out of the silo is intentional.
Great. So we have 2 more questions, and this is a little lighter. This has been a great conversation. And Jerry, I'm very interested to hear I'm interested in what all you have to say, but you're a professor. So what gives you hope for the future of journalism as someone who is right there with the future journalists? And what skills will this generation need?
Here's the reverse of being the skunk in the garden party. I look at the students that come to my class. As I said, it meets Monday morning at 8 a.m. and I get basically 100% attendance.
Wow.
And the young student journalists today, especially getting opportunities, whether it's to work right for the Waltham Times, Middlesex News, any other hyperlocal or other for-profit news organization, they're enthusiastic about it, they're learning the right skills, they're committed to wanting to be good journalists, even knowing. I always joke when class starts that I tell them, welcome enemies of the people in training. I don't know if you want to do this, but I'm here to help as long as you do. The biggest problem that I see for students wanting to commit is, again, it's a financial one. You can't make a living being a reporter. But we keep cycling class after class after class, and if just a handful stick, and to multiply it from BU and Northeastern and other schools that have good, Emerson, where have good journalism programs, and then you take it around the country and elsewhere, you're going to start to build a pool of committed, quality journalists. And, just sort of going back for a moment to answer the question, curation is right. And we mentioned media literacy, and I think it's also media hygiene. Knowing what your sources are, what they represent, what their viewpoint is also going to be very helpful.
Great. Jason?
So Access Framingham is in a slightly different position because we are an established nonprofit with media content creation infrastructure. So our news is focused on video and audio creation. And I think that is how a lot of people consume information. And I used to think that the term meeting people where they're at was sort of a sign of resignation, but now I see that it's actually helping people that are struggling to find local information. So for us, having that established infrastructure to then create more video media content that we can then, have a website, which is a very important piece of real estate, where we can show the work, where we can have a bibliography and cite the sources, is a recipe for us. We are not in Boston, so our entire pool of support is coming from Framingham State, and we're really looking to continue to build that bridge.
And let's ask the ground. Right. Yeah.
June?
We have the privilege of working with journalism students at BU, the local journalism program, and also at Brandeis. And then we're helping Bentley University kind of start up a media program that's been done for a while. And also at the high school. And especially with places like BU and Brandeis, I've just been blown away by the number of students who want to do this. So that gives me a lot of hope, and they understand the mission, and they're willing to work hard. pay a pittance trying out their students. I don't know, we take to rent, we use them at some point when they need to move on to, or, we hope that we can be a platform for them to then land a job, but we hope to get to where we can pay a few staff people ourselves. But I think the quality of the kids, the journalism students today, and their drive, and really their sophistication gives me a lot of hope. There's an amazing pool of talent.
That's great to hear. Kristen?
Conversations like this absolutely give me hope that people are interested and want to be, well educated about how they're being informed of what they're taking in. Solutions, always solutions, like the Waltham Times. Needham has a nonprofit newspaper that I've been studying and getting up to a date on. I heard about another solution coming out of California where it's specifically for municipalities where journalists can go onto this website, find out what their state or local leaders have voted on, and then they can take that as a news tip and turn it into a story. So lots of solutions that come, solutions rise up in the spaces of opportunity. And this is a space of opportunity when it looks like media is really it is, where it's being attacked. And then separately, the pushback. I get excited about seeing people rise up and say, no, this is not what it should be. And we want to continue to keep the integrity of the thing. That gives me hope that people are awake. They're awake and they are impacted by this. They know that they're impacted and they want something better for the generations to come.
Wonderful. On that happy note about the future generation, it seems like the future will be better. I want to thank everybody for listening to this conversation and to our wonderful panel for this great discussion. I'm sure we could all go on for a couple more hours. I have more questions upon questions, but I just wanted, if we can just give them a round of applause for this discussion. I hope, the big words that came up for us today in all the notes that I was taking, and I hope you were taking notes, is trust, community, and local. And here we are as Leadership MetroWest, and we are the leaders in our local community. So the question that I would like to leave us all with is, how can we, as leaders in our community, do more to support and promote and build community, trust, and local, and be more of a stronger local community? That's my question for you all. I know I'm going to be thinking about this for a while. And we're going to continue this conversation on social media, even though social media is like the hottest of messes right now. We have a great Facebook group for Leadership MetroWest alumni. And if you're not in it, please join it. It's a really good place where everything else is a mess. Come and talk about what's going on with leadership in our Facebook group. Share the events that you're doing. What are you volunteering with? What do you need help with? Because right now it's looking like the Mary Kate, Jamie, Trish show, and we're fascinating people, I assure you. But I would love to hear from more people. Share what you're doing. And we're going to be posting some questions, because we used to do the little question and do group work. Well, we're going to do group work online. So please join us in the Facebook group. It's Leadership MetroWest Alumni, and I'll see you there. And thank you so much for coming to today's breakfast.